Welcome, my friends, to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm DC Gomez, and I'm thrilled you're joining me today for a fun conversation with a passionate author. We're kicking off the program, like it's our tradition, with a short reading from the feature book. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get started.
Well, hi, I'm Payal Doshi, and I'm the author of Ria and the Blood of the Nectar, which is a middle grade fantasy about 12-year-old Ria Chetri from a small town in Darjeeling, India, whose twin brother Rohan goes missing on the night of their 12th birthday. What ensues is an adventure, a portal fantasy, riddles that have to be solved, evil creatures that have to be fought, dark secrets that are unearthed, and a wild ride of an adventure. So I'm going to read a little excerpt from the book. It's in the bang center of the book. It's from chapter 18, and it is titled The Sea of Serpent Lilies. Now, at this point in the book, Ria and her friend Leela have portaled into the magical land of Astranthia, where they think Ria's twin brother, Rohan, who has gone missing, is. And they have been told that he might be imprisoned in this castle that's in the middle of this gigantic lake. The only problem is that the lake is infested by these serpent lilies, these venomous, evil creatures. And so one of their friends that they make in Astranthia is Zarantha, and this little fairy that was called Flula, and we call her Pari because Pari is the Hindi term for the word fairy. They help Ria and Leela, but Zarantha says, I'm only going to give you a boat. I'm not going to come into the waters because everyone who has traversed this lake has died. So I'm going to wait for you. I wish you guys luck, so be careful, and hopefully we'll see you on the other side. Flula, the Pari, accompanies them for a short bit, so that's just the general introduction to this part that I'm going to read. Okay. The night's darkness expanded around them, and the moon, rotund as an ostrich egg, spilled its light onto the inky waters. Ria and Leela stepped into the boat, taking their place on the wooden beams. Ria in the front and Leela at the back. Zarantha untied the rope from the rock and gave the boat a push. Flula flitted overhead, following along. Ria watched as Zarantha grew smaller on the shore, his troubled expression growing harder to see as they drifted out into the lake. At first, Ria and Leela paddled slowly and awkwardly. It seemed to take ages for them to learn how to paddle and sink. Eventually, they figured it out, and rowing together, the boat moved swiftly through the smooth waters. No one said paddling was going to be so hard, said Leela. It's barely been 10 minutes, and my arms feel like they're going to fall off. Hush, whispered Flula from high above. You wake them. But where are they? Ria had expected to find these lilies all around. I don't find any resistance under my paddle either. Same, said Leela, and she dipped her hand into the water. What are you doing? Cried Flula. Checking to see if the lilies are submerged. It happens sometimes to lotuses back home. Flula's glitter turned dark. You don't have to go looking for them. They will find you. Now, keep your hands inside the boat, both of you. As they rowed deeper into the lake, Ria and Leela paddled with greater ease. Farigoli's twinkled far along the shore, and the water shimmered with their reflections. It would have been beautiful if it weren't so eerie. Glibbity-gibbet, squivered Flula. I see them. The mist lifted, and a profusion of moon-white lilies surfaced above the water. Uh-oh, uttered Leela, as the boat cut through mats of flat, rubbery leaves. Ria breathed in their soft floral scent. Look, she said. A hazy outline of a castle appeared in the distance, shrouded in moonshine. Ria couldn't believe it. Before her very eyes was the castle, and somewhere inside it was Rohan. Flula's glow dimmed in fear, and Ria and Leela paddled with all their might. But as time passed, they were no closer to the castle than before. Let's slow down a bit, suggested Ria, settling her paddle on her knees and leaning against the side of the boat. Her arms felt like they were weighed down with sandbags. Don't stop rowing, yelled Flula. We're not. We just took a nanosecond break, said Ria, paddling immediately. Ew, what's that? Leela asked, pointing. A fetid smell curled up from the lake. and one by one the lilies began to darken with decay. Let's not panic, said Ria. They're only shrieked Leela. A creature as long as her leg, band with petals, coiled around the shaft of her paddle. As Leela tried to shake it free, the creature's tongue, forked like a snake, shot out of its mouth towards her. The boat wobbled precariously. Get off! Get off! Ria screamed, jabbing the clinging flower snake with her paddle. The creature retreated and slipped back into the water. Are you all right? She asked Leela. I think so, replied Leela. Sweat covered her face and she held onto the side of the boat, shivering. Dara hooked its claws into Ria. If anything happened to Leela, it would be her fault, just like losing Rohan was. Right then, Flula screeched. In their shock, they had stopped paddling, and the lake belched like an undersea monster. Rotting lilies from every direction sprang out of the water. Their sinewy stems had transformed into slithering bodies, and their petals with razor-sharp teeth crowned their reptilian faces. Locking onto their prey with their bloodless eyes, they shot through the water, their flat, slimy leaves twisting into fins. Sarantha was right. We're going to die, cried Leela, her teeth chattering. Keep moving, shouted Flula. And Ria whipped the water with her paddle, creating waves to keep the lilies from coming too close. Suddenly, a sturdy tug reverberated from under the boat, and Ria turned. Leela! She yelled. Serpent lilies excreting sticky secretions were slinking up the edges of the boat. Taking turns, she and Leela thwacked them, but the serpents inched higher, smacking the paddles with their sharp tails. Every few seconds, Flula cried warnings as more lilies slid up the boat or soared out of the water. Ria was completely drenched. The boat had veered considerably away from the castle, and before she could think of what to do next, Leela sprang out of her seat. 2 serpent lilies had snuck inside the boat, right between her and Leela's legs. Ria tried to kick the creatures back into the water, but they pounced, snapping their jaws. Leela smacked at them with her paddle, but one lily leaped and coiled itself around her leg. Ria threw down her paddle and grabbed the serpent with both her hands. Peeling it off her friend, she hurled it far into the lake, and as the serpent lily arced through the air, she spotted a piece of Leela's petaled skirt snagged on one of its fangs. Heart pounding, she glanced at Leela, who was frozen with fear. Leela had turned pale as the moon. We're as good as dead, she said, staring at the relentless lilies. Desperately, Ria tried to come up with more ideas. This is like a puzzle, she thought. Just another puzzle to be solved with the tools we have. As she racked her brain for a way out, a pack of lilies seized Leela's paddle with their teeth, snapping it into 2. Leela swung around in terror and accidentally sliced Ria's arm with the broken edge of her paddle. Blood poured out of Ria like a river, and her wound throbbed as if it had a heart of its own. White spots clouded her vision, and she cried out in pain. Leela gaped at Ria's wound. What have I done? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's okay. Keep paddling, Ria said with a wince. Staring at the blood flowing down her arm, Ria tried not to pass out. Trying to numb the pain, she shook her arm over the water. The moment a droplet of Ria's blood touched one of the serpent lilies, its root-like body twisted out of the water and it screeched in agony. Watch out, cried Leela. The writhing creature leaped for Ria's face, but before it could reach her, its body swelled like a balloon. Then, like a firecracker, it burst. Guts, blood, and flesh flying everywhere. You did it! You did it! Yelled Leela. You destroyed the serpent lily. I did? Asked Ria. How? With my blood? Before Leela could answer, the serpent lilies, angry and venomous, swarmed around them. Their faces glistened and their fangs dripped with hunger. Ria and Leela flung the remaining paddle into the water, giving them something other than the boat to jump on. In seconds, there was nothing left of it. Watching the snapping jaws come closer, Ria and Leela crawled into each other's arms, crying. The boat cracked. The water rushed in. Ria looked at Leela. She had failed her. She had failed everyone.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Inside the Minds of Authors. I am so excited today. We have my incredible friend and talented who did an awesome rating. Hi, Madame. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm so glad to be here.
I am thrilled you're joining us. This is so exciting. This is such a fun book, by the way. You did an amazing reading. So, shout out. Woohoo! Not to mention, preteens are so dramatic.
Oh, wow.
So, we're going to jump right in and get started because this book is so exciting and it has so many different elements. And I don't want to waste any more time. So, tell us, where did you come up with the story? Where did it start?
Well, it's a long story. Where did it start? I wasn't one of those authors who, like, at age 8 knew that they wanted to write a book. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I basically stumbled into writing because I was working in a magazine publishing firm. I was 23 years old. I loved to read ever since I was a kid. That's the one thing that I always did. But I was very frustrated working at my job in the magazine industry. I was a writer there and I was fed up of writing articles that my editor kept telling me to write about. I was like, I want to write about something I want to write about. I want to have that freedom. Except I didn't know what that was. What was it that I wanted to write? I remember very vividly one morning, it was a Saturday morning, I just opened up my laptop and I said, I'm going to write what I want to write about. And I wrote the first thing that came into my head. And it was 2 paragraphs, about 200 words. And it was a story about this 8-year-old girl. And she runs off into the woods behind her house. And they were the forbidden woods. She wasn't allowed to go there. But she sneaks off into the woods and something mysterious and magical happens with a banyan tree. And then she runs back out. And she's scared, but she's also very intrigued about what has happened. And I remember after I finished writing those 2 paragraphs, I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to write this story. And so immediately I just plotted out the whole story. I wrote down bullet points. In that sense, it came very intuitively. I put all of the elements I loved as a kid when I read. So I have riddles in this book. It's a mystery. It's this young girl, and she goes off to save her brother, not the other way around. She has magic and she discovers she has a princess. So are all of the things that I loved as a 10, 11, even 9-year-old, I put into this book where it's a magical, fun, adventurous quest. And that there is a story about sibling love at its heart and rivalry as well. That was the genesis of the idea and the inspiration. The funny thing is, when I wrote this, though, the very first draft of it, I had about 70,000 words that I wrote over a span of a few months, like maybe 7 or 8 months. And this girl that I told you, this 8-year-old girl who ran into the woods, she was called Rose, and her brother was called Bryant. Her parents were John and Hyacinth Bennett. They lived in the English countryside. I set the whole thing in basically some place in England. Whole book, wrote the whole thing, never once thinking about writing this story from my perspective or my experience. It didn't even occur to me. I finished writing this book, and I had studied business management and no educational experience in writing whatsoever. So I decided, I'm like, I need some help. So I enrolled for a writing workshop. This was back in Mumbai. I'm Indian. I used to live in India. I now live here in the States, but born and bred Indian. So this was back in Bombay, Mumbai. So I enrolled for a writing workshop and I went in and I read my first chapter. I was so excited and nervous. I thought I did a really good job. I was like waiting for my teacher to say something nice about what I read. And she just looked at me with this disdainful expression. And she had only one question for me. And she's like, why are you not writing about your experiences? Why is it that you, much like all of us in that writing workshop, were writing about white characters? Each of us in our short stories or whatever. And I remember thinking, really? That's what you're going to tell me? So big deal if I'm not writing about. I've only read stories with white characters. So I was so annoyed and upset and angry. I was coming back home in the cab. And then I was like, but why didn't I? And I say this a lot in the panels that I do to teachers and to librarians who are Caucasian. Imagine sitting to write a story and automatically in your head thinking, just intuitively, the first thing that comes to your head is of course I'm going to write about an Indian kid from India. It's so bizarre. This is not just my experience. A lot of POC writers, especially who live outside of the US. So that changed this book for me completely. It was the biggest epiphany I had. It was the best critique I got from a teacher. And I was like, I'm going to write a book about an Indian kid because we're 1 billion strong and you can count the number of books with Indian kids on the cover of a fantasy book doing great fun things. And it's not only about the pain story or the struggle story or immigrant story, an identity crisis or a war or a poverty story. All those stories are very, very important from the perspective, if you're writing from an Indian perspective. But we also have fun. We're also happy kids. We have so much more to offer as well. We just don't have that one narrative that keeps following us. And so this book then became that for me, like a badass, fun story that celebrated Indian kids, that isn't specifically about India or Indian culture. Like, don't read my book to learn about it. All of those elements are there, just as they are in a book that you read that has white kids from London or Canada or the States or Australia or whatever. It's one part of who they are, but the main thing is they're kids like every other kid in the world. They have the same dreams, ambitions, wanting to have friends and family and do great things and be heroes and have magic and save the world. Because I never saw that ever.
It is also a very, very beautiful story and a very powerful one because we tend to create the things that we have been brought up to read. So when you decided to take on this, because it's huge, you're taking on an industry that is not familiar. How prepared were you to actually battle this? Because this is a huge undertaking.
The good thing was I was completely ignorant, which was very useful in writing the book, at least finishing it. That's one of the biggest challenges with writers, right? Like, finish your book, finish it. Then you have a million revisions, and then comes how do I publish, and then how do I sell, and all of those things.
Yep.
Often, even I, as I'm writing or drafting a story, I'm already thinking of, oh, when it becomes a book, but it's not even finished, So luckily, I was completely ignorant about market trends or the fact that there would be great prejudice against my book. I had no idea. I just wrote this book that I wanted to write. Now, I finished writing it, and then I went down the traditional publishing route. So I started looking for agents to then find and then to sell to a publisher. And that is when reality struck hard. So my book is set partly in India, because my characters are Indian. They live in this small town called Darjeeling in the northeast part of the country. And then when they portal into the fantastical land called Astranthia, that land is not Indian. And I wrote it purposefully to not be Indian. It is a place where I didn't want anyone to read it and be able to put it on a map. It's a mix of East and West influences, very much like my influences growing up as a millennial and basically a 90s kid. We had MTV and we had the internet, and I grew up on the Backstreet Boys hard, loved Hollywood movies, but watched Bollywood. So I had family lived in the US, and so would travel there, but like completely steeped in Indian culture. So Astranthia has Celtic references, British references, Indian references. They don't see color. They don't see all the prejudices that we see here on planet Earth, but they have their own other issues. But those are not those issues. Now I'm here pitching to agents. Initially, you send them a sample, like 1 chapter or 5 chapters. And if they find that interesting, they'll ask for the whole manuscript. So almost every query of mine got converted into a full manuscript. So I was feeling very confident, like, this is great. And then one by one, the rejections started coming. Over the span of 2 years, I must have pitched to almost 70 to 80 agents. The different rejection letters that I got were on the lines of, this is great, love it, but can we have Ria spend more time in Darjeeling so we can get a better sense of her life there and the struggles that she's facing and her day-to-day. And I'm thinking, okay, but her brother has gone missing, so she needs to get to finding him, because her mother is also a tea picker. So they are, again, from a low-income family. They are called tea plantations. They're up on the hills of Darjeeling, and they have to go and pick the tea leaves. Manual labor, hard labor. And Ria comes from poor family. So I knew exactly what they wanted. And I said, no, I'm writing this book specifically to move away from the fact that every Indian story does not have to be one of struggle, or that being the main focus. Ria goes through enough struggles in her life, but it's not about the poverty or that. Then I had a lot of agents write to me saying that we loved it, but can you please turn Astranthia into a Indian-inspired land? And when I asked why, they said that it was for reasons of marketability. That if you don't make that Indian, then we cannot market this book as an Indian-inspired fantasy. Now, my book is not mythological either. So again, when it comes to underrepresented cultures, and especially POC cultures, they love to make it more exotic, like, oh, we're telling their mythology. So if you take away the mythology, oh, so this is a regular magic book and it's only a little bit in India? I said, yeah, but the characters are Indian. The way they view this other world is also through an Indian lens. It's not that they suddenly have forgotten the fact, that they're Indian. And also, it's just a story about these kids who just happen to be Indian. Just like Harry Potter just happened to be British. It wasn't like J.K. Rowling sitting there saying, I'm going to write a British story. Like, she just wrote what she knew. But when it comes to underrepresented cultures, BIPOC cultures, it's just a very different lens suddenly. I was asked to change our strength here. I said, but that's like 3/4 of the book, and I'm not going to change there. No. Then I had a couple that said that they loved it, that they wish they could sign me on, but they had just signed on another Indian author who had signed it, who had written an Indian fantasy book. And that I remember very clearly thinking, no, I missed the boat. Like, I wish I had reached out a month earlier. Like, oh no, they just signed on another author like me. Never once thinking, I mean, you can have 50 of us and you can still have very different stories. Like, now I know. But that time I didn't. And I just felt like, shoot, I missed the boat. I should have been quicker. Why did I take so much time writing this book? All of those different things. So that's when I got my harsh reality that if you're writing a book, especially one that has POC characters, there's so much business that goes behind the book. Like, is it mythology? Are you writing about Indian culture? Is it the poverty? Is it this? Is it that? And my book didn't fit any of those boxes. And so I didn't get an agent. I was very devastated. There's the Publishers Weekly magazine. They have an online edition, digital edition, and subscribe to that. They keep telling you about the deals that are happening in the industry, keep you kind of sort of up to date. And in the children's section, I saw that there was a company that was called at the time Bharat Babies, and they had signed on an author for a book. And that caught my eye because Bharat is the Hindi word for India. So then I was like, okay, who are these guys? And I looked them up, and they were a small independent press that were based out of Boston. The owner, Payal Doshi, she's a first-generation Indian American, and she started this company because when she had her baby daughter and she loved reading, she found no books, no picture books with Indian characters in them and like authentic stories and that are written by Indians. So you have more of an authentic experience. So she started this publishing company to bring more of South Asian literature across the diaspora into the industry. I reached out to them just like I did with the query letters, and they again asked for the full manuscript, and I'd forgotten about it completely. While all of this agent mess was happening, and I was sort of just in depths of despair, deep depression, weeks of sobbing, I got an email from the Bharat Babies saying that they loved the book and that they wanted to set up the call. I found out that the editor, though, was white. So I kind of held back my excitement because I'm like, here we go again. She's going to be like, change our strand here. We need more of poverty, blah, blah, blah. So when I spoke to her name is Amy Moranville. She was amazing. She gave me feedback on the story. Let's deepen her character here. Let's work on this narrative arc. This is fantastic. She didn't once mention that our strength here needs to be changed. So she got the book. I was so happy. I was like, where do I sign? Can we just sign? So then that's how I signed with, so Bharat Babies then changed its name and now they're called Mango and Marigold Press. And they've been great because if it wasn't for them, this story would not be out in the world and it has been received so well.
Tell me, sweetie, what are you working on now?
So I am now working on the sequel to this book. It's hopefully a bigger, darker, badder Astranthia. There's a new villain. There's some new characters. So I'm excited. So I'm working on that. I'm sort of in the first revision of it. And I'm also working on I don't know if I should disclose it, but I'm working on a story in a YA anthology. I'll just say that much. The official announcement has not been made, so I can't say too much, but I'm excited. It's my first time writing YA. So
Nice.
I'm getting a little slice of what you do because I'm just writing a short story. But yeah, so those two things.
I'm so excited for you. Congratulations. Tell me, sweetie, I can chit chat for you forever because it's so much fun and I so much enjoy your work. What advice will you give to a new author?
The new author. Okay. Well, I will give them the advice that I wish I had or I have learned very much is that as a debut author, first-time author, whether you are published traditionally, indie published, self-published, the constant is that you are the one who also has to handle and think about the marketing side of things. And that is, especially once you have your book out, that is equally as important as writing maybe your next book. if you want to gain some traction with the book that's been published, to have the idea that, oh, it'll take a life of its own, or if you're published traditionally, that your publisher's going to do all that for you. No. When we see big publishers put money behind authors, they are usually already very successful authors who technically don't need any more publicity, but they get all of it. Or every year, a publisher out of the maybe 200, 300 titles that they publish will have picked 2, 3 titles that they think will do very well. And then they put all their money behind those 2, 3 titles. So for most of us, we are basically swimming in this gigantic pool with all of these other debut authors trying to be like, hey, look at me, like I'm here. So know that that's something you will have to do and you should do, and find the ways on social media. Find a platform that you enjoy and are comfortable with. You don't have to go into every single thing. You don't have to drive yourself crazy, but just know that that element of promoting your book and pushing your book and marketing your book comes almost hand in hand. Now, that does not guarantee any sales. I'm not saying that there's a direct correlation, but there's definitely correlation. And if you put in the work, more people will have seen your book versus if you didn't do it. So that would be my advice to an author.
It is a beautiful advice to our listeners and authors who are considering this. Nobody tells us these things. It is the part that you learn the hard way, because we always think in a dozen minutes, like, I wrote the book, I put my heart and soul. Why is it not selling? And they're like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, wait, what? Oh, that. Tell me, sweetie, where can we learn more about you? Where can we find the book?
So you can learn more about me on my website, which is payaldoshiauthor.com. I'm most active on Instagram at Payal Doshi Author. I'm also on Twitter at Payal D Writes. The book can be found all places, I would say Amazon, all of Barnes and Nobles, all of the indie bookstores, especially now in their online catalogs. You should be able to find the book, and Bookshop, IndieBound. And yeah, there are links on my website as well. So you can go there and get a copy.
It is fabulously, and it's so much fun, especially if you like middle school, and even it's very borderline YA, by the way. So you're still within that category. I think so. You'll be fine writing YA. Don't worry about it. Stop stressing. You got this. So before you leave us, are you ready for the lightning round?
Oh my gosh, yes. All right. Okay.
Don't think too much. Easy peasy. Let's do this. Breakfast or dinner?
Dinner.
Pirate or knight?
Oh my God. Depending on what they look like. If it's a cute pirate, then pirate. It's a cute knight.
We'll put question mark. Hiking or swimming?
Swimming all the way.
Nice. Sailor Moon or Power Ranger?
You know, I have never read Sailor Moon because
Did you watch the TV shows?
I had no idea what Sailor Moon was until I came to the US.
Okay.
Now I don't know, but at least my generation growing up, none of us had ever heard of Sailor Moon. I didn't know it was like such a deep, like cult classic following, and I had no idea. So I'd have to say Power Rangers because I know of Power Rangers and watch Power Rangers, but I am so intrigued. I mean, people are like, you got to watch the original TV series first and then read the book. Like, I know, like Sailor Moon, it's like the thing. So I really want to read Sailor Moon because there's so many authors who say that that's their inspiration as well.
Leap, you should be happily surprised. Like, oh, this is what it was. Here's our last one. If you could play any character in any film, who will you play?
Oh my gosh. Okay. The first thing that comes to mind, right? Because this is lightning round. So I'm not thinking about this too much. I was obsessed with Mortal Kombat as a kid. I say kid, but like as a, 11, 12, 13, teenager. Obsessed. Have you played Mortal Kombat? I was obsessed with Sonya, the character, because I think she was the only female. And I had a mad crush on her as well. I didn't realize it. Like, I wanted to be Sonya. And when the movies came out, I would like drag my mom to it, of all people. Poor mother, to sit through the Mortal Kombat movies. And I was like enthralled watching Sonya and all of the fight scenes and just being badass and cool. So I have no physical capabilities of playing this character in any of the martial combat or the nothing. But since we're wishing, I would love to play Sonya in a Mortal Kombat movie.
I take it. I love it. Darling, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you have any closing remarks?
Well, just thank you so much for having me. It has just been such a blast to chat with you. And in the advice question that you asked me about what I would give to authors, I would just say, like, once you're an author, like, look out for festivals and just go apply for them, because that's how you and I met. And that's how I pitched myself. And then they said, yeah, sure, come along. We met and here we are today. And we're building our community, which is also such a huge thing. If you're an author, these are things you can do to build community and connections. And so I'm so glad that that happened and that we met each other and now we're connected. So thank you.
It is a beautiful journey, and we are a beautiful community. Once people get to know us, it's amazing. So, sweetie, congratulations. Happy dance again.
Thank
To
you.
our listeners, go pick up the book. You are going to love this adventure. This is your book. Come and pick it up. Have an amazing time, everyone. Remember, we're going to be back next week with another fabulous author. So give us a like, review the podcast, share with somebody, and I'll see you back next week. Bye.